HIV doctor. I work in Oakland, and right now I'm actually working for the county that I live in, which is Alameda County. It includes Oakland and Berkeley and 14 other cities. But I'm a long time, person who's participated in CQII and all of its different manifestations. And I'm really, really interested in particularly the issues of how to engage.
May have to get a USB to.
How to engage consumers, in design of programs, but also really importantly in services to other individuals. So I can remember the first time that I ever saw this happen. I was seeing a woman, it was a patient of mine, who was a young woman who was dealing with, she had just found out HIV positive, and she was concerned about her life plan, which was to have kids. And there was a peer that was working with us in the World, for people who know that, Women Organized to Respond to Life-Threatening Diseases. It's based here in Oakland. So there was his name was Star, who was working with us that day. And when the door opened, my patient wasn't sure she wanted to see anybody else, but when the door opened and she saw Star, who was just vibrant and beautiful and obviously really thriving, this became very clear to me in that 1 second, that there was something that peers could give people that I can never do for them, which is to give them hope and a dream for the future of what they could be. So I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. Jeffrey, are you available to introduce yourself now, or should we come back to you?
Morning, I'm super available. I kind of have mixed feelings about that, but I'm available to introduce myself now, if that works for folks.
Go for it.
My name is Jeffrey Suter. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I have primarily worked in community mental health and medical settings. So Kathleen invited me to talk about family genograms, and because I believe understanding where you come from is an important and critical part of development. I was very excited for the opportunity to talk about this as well, right? I usually don't sound like this. This is like a delayed laryngitis. But everything has went to shit since COVID, so we just gonna keep it moving, right?
Well put, very succinct. So can we go ahead and put the slides up? I see that people are identifying themselves in the chat, which is great. And why don't we go ahead to the next slide? So we're going to do some introductions of who's here. And then I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the framework. There's a scholarly framework for this. I won't talk a lot about that, but a little bit, which is a culturally affirmative practice. And then I'm going to show you a couple of videos of people having their genograms done by somebody, then a little bit of instruction about how you do it. I'm going to interview Jeffrey for his genogram, and then you'll have a few minutes to practice your own. When we do this in person, people do it in pairs, and you talk your way through your genogram with a partner. That's very difficult to do online. So instead you're going to do it by yourself, but then we'll debrief it and talk about it together. And then lastly, we'll follow up with how do you see you using this idea in the work that you're doing, your life work, your work with clients. So let's go ahead to the next one. So you're already doing this one, putting your name and organization in the chat. Thank you, if you're associated with a particular organization. And also, could you put into the chat one fun thing you're doing this weekend? I have the weekend off, yay! And I'm looking for suggestions. So anything that you're that you're looking forward to this weekend. I think it's both really needed and a little hard in a weird way for us to get back out there, socializing and doing stuff. At least for a lot of people it is. So just something to look forward to that digs you off your couch and out of your office and out to something fun. And then as people are doing that, and I would love to, if there are some volunteers, for people to talk about this why question. Why are you doing this work? Was there an event or a person or a moment or an idea or an inspiration that brought you, to doing work with, as healthcare workers and mental health workers, et cetera? And then I always like to know, what's the fun part for you? What's the part that really lights you up? So, there's some great stuff coming up in the chat. So is anybody willing to volunteer to talk a little bit about that why question?
Hi, Miss Kathleen.
Hey, it's so good to see you again.
It's good to see you again as well. Repeat that question again, Miss Kathleen, because we got to keep it rolling. We love to chat.
Yeah. We love chat, but it is nice to actually talk to each other. So the question was just, why do you do the work that you do? A lot of times, not always, but there's a person or an event in your life or something, a value that you hold. What is it that has made you to work with people?
Okay. Speaking personally, Miss Kathleen, I'm going back when I first got diagnosed with HIV, and it was a trying time because it was stigmatized as dying from. I mean, I'm going back to the early 2000s. And I was a patient then. But one thing that made a difference in my life, because basically everyone whom I knew of in that small town, if you were diagnosed with it, you were dead before the physician before God or the physician could label your grave. Society did, cultural society. And so when I got diagnosed, there was this change agent, Dr. Cardosi from Care Team, and she encouraged me and instilled in me, she refueled faith, I put it like that, because I always had faith, but it was just a trying time, I'll tell you. And she said, you are one of the ones that we're not gonna let fall through the crack. And she said, and I had a very low CD4 count, less than 8. And she sent in this nurse. She said, I just want you to meet someone. She didn't tell me the status of this nurse. This beautiful honey brown lady come into the room and sat next to my bed. And she just had this open conversation. And she said, she gave me hope, and she said, and I'm just looking at her, she said, because I live with it. I mean, she was thick up, beautiful to the beauty, and it just opened my eyes like, wow, then it is possible to become living with it and not dying from, because it was like, what I saw, it was death center, but until I saw her, because basically she was the first person that I had seen who was living with it, basically, because the stereotype, like how it was. And then lo and behold, as my sponsor says, what was meant to want to kill me turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because I now step into the shoes of that nurse that gave me hope. I, being a peer navigator, me and Chris, we engage with our patients and infuel hope into them, if nothing else. That we live today with healthcare compliance. The choice is ours.
I love that. Thank you so much for that story. Chris, I see you've been writing in the chat. Do you want to join your work partner there and unmute and tell us a little bit about that? Why do you do the work?
I have no voice.
Oh no, you sound just like Jeffrey did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I have no voice. So I wrote it in the chat.
Okay, I appreciate. We won't call on you verbally again. That sounded painful, Chris. But
Jeffrey,
Jeffrey,
I can tell you, Miss Kathleen, from me and Chris' perspective, the patients aren't just fulfilled. It's fulfilled for the both of us too. Trust me, we are fulfilled, from just the engagement of meeting the patients, and they encourage us and we encourage them. The bridge gappers, put it like that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. it can be really joyful work. Sometimes it's not, but it can be really joyful work. Is anybody
Hi,
else? Vicky, I
can
see
you
your
guys
hand. Oh, sorry, Jesse, and then Vicky. Go ahead, Jesse.
can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
My name is Jesse Grant. I am a medical case manager with Charter Oak Health Center here in Hartford, Connecticut. Back in 1978, I had a dream. And in that dream, which I later come to realize was a premonition. I saw men dying and dead everywhere. They were lying in the bed dead, they were in the streets dead. Then I moved to San Francisco in 1979. And I remember reading a column by a guy named Herb Cain. And what struck me in the column was doctors were seeing this new cancer, which now we know is sarcoma, and a lot of the patients that were coming to the clinic. And he also knows that many of them were also continuing to go to places what we call the bathhouses, where they were having multiple sexual partners. And so, lo and behold, it was soon thereafter that just everything just fell apart. So many of the people that I knew would, they'd come and tell me their escapades and the parties and things that they were doing were falling ill with the virus.
Yeah.
And at the time, the life expectancy was not very long because we didn't have in place what we have now in terms of medications. And then fast forward, my first brother that acquired HIV was in 1981, but he caught his from sharing needles. The second brother, he caught his from a female. And I do remember that one moment at our mother's house, I said to my mother, I said, Ma, that girl got an awful lot of medication in her purse. And so we didn't know what to make of it, but come to find out she was HIV positive. And what got me into the field was, it's all very personal, was the lack of respect that I saw as I tried to get both of my brothers care. I was very much involved in their care from the onset. And I said to myself, I said, stop complaining about it, do something about it, be a part of it. And that doctor that I was involved with guided me in that direction because he knew that I was really having a hard time dealing with it. And he offered me an opportunity to do something about it by joining his team as an employee. I became an outreach educator. I outreach, engage, and linked many into care. And then I became a program director at a facility that I previously worked at. Currently, I'm doing medical case management, and I love what I do because I care about our people. I make sure that they get the service that they should be getting. I love the educational component to educate them as I ask them share this information with others so you can go out there and educate as well. And that's the reason why I'm in this field. Plus, I work with some wonderful people. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better team to work with. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been retained in this field and will continue to work in this field and do what I can do to help reduce and ultimately get rid of HIV.
Thank you, Jesse. That was wonderful sharing. Thank you for that. So we've got Vicky and then Cindy, and then we're going to go ahead and move on. I know everybody has a story like that here. And I love, they keep me going, hearing people's stories. So Vicky, you took your hand down, but did you want to say something? Oh, it was Cindy. Sorry. What? I'm having trouble figuring this out here. Vicky or Cindy, does either of you want to unmute and share a story with us about your why? Okay. Okay. So I think that we are good. Oh, I see what it is. It's actually my own cursor. Yeah, I appreciate that, Michelle-Ian. So let's go ahead and go back to the slides for a minute. I just wanted to say that part of the reason for doing this as an introduction, part of it is because I'm ready for people's stories. Because like I said, they're fuel for me, they keep me going. But partly it's also to point out that each of you has a person, we come to do for lots of different, such as we in our society kind of want us to be like, I'm an individual, I don't need anybody to achieve on my own. That's not real. And what's real is that we all come from somewhere and somebody, and those ties never go away. And so we're going to talk through this in a minute. We'll see if you agree, but I think that really leaning into, if people we're working with from is something that will be helpful to them and also to us. So our objectives are, we're going to talk about one particular technique, which is called the genogram, that allows us to kind of map a person's family history. There are other quick tools like that. One, just you in the middle and circles around you of people who help you or people you're in contact with, to just kind of show the closeness or distantness of those bonds and what to work on. The genogram is useful because so much of our history as a country is based on people coming from somewhere else to somewhere else. People move around a lot. And thinking about how all of what happened just a couple generations back, in fact, is not gone. It's still there and it has influence with us today. So I think that the reason for doing the experiences, it helps us to identify what are the strengths and the weaknesses, but especially the strengths and assets that we get from our background and from other people. So you're going to get a chance to experience this particular tool. I'll show you a video of it. Jeffrey and I will do one together, and then you'll experiment at home on your desk for a minute. And then we'll start, talking about how we might use them. Next one. So here's my hypothesis. I think medical care in general, probably all, Chris and Robert, people who are doing that work, it may not, but in general, things that are not going well for people, and has very little in the way of tool time pulled from people to recover from this or this. We tend to exclude people's families, either their love families or their blood families, and forget, as medical people, that really is part of medicine. Is people don't get better, but that kind of support. And I think some people stop coming to clinic. So this is where we're going to our, and the epidemic linkage. People stop coming to clinic because it's always a bummer. They always are being told something's broken. Something's broken, and there's something new coming along that is wrong with them. And then finally, people talk a lot about social determinants of health, and we talk about them all as negative things. You probably have all heard that. So it's homelessness and poverty and racism, but social determinants like your talents, the ability to know how to get help from others, those are all social things also, and they actually contribute to health and well-being. They're not deterrents to health. They're actually levers and important assets. So let me stop there for a second and see if people have anything they want to respond to about that. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you agree with some more than others?
You talk about what we see here, Miss Kathleen, but medical care
That's
is
what I'm
very
talking about.
negative. I say it depends upon the system of employees within that healthcare, medical care, because we here at Little River, we don't play that, no ma'am, because that's part of what me and Chris, not just saying, we let the patients know that we're not just employees, we're patients as well. So that give them a sensibility of understanding that they are not alone. And apparently, if we treat ourselves with self-care, we aim to treat them with respect and dignity as well. Especially with our history of how it used to be when being diagnosed. Oh no, ma'am, it's got to be a better change to make we as patients feel that we're not just numerically labeled, but as a whole person.
Yeah, I love that, Robert. And I think that's part of this work. We must figure this out, how to have more and more consumers who are part of care teams. So I see that Rochelian, I'm going to get your name wrong. You'll have to tell us when you unmute. But could you go ahead and unmute and tell us what you were thinking?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you pronounce her name for us so we get it right?
Yes, it's Raquelian.
Raquel.
Yeah, you never stood a chance. It was misspelled at birth. But I agree with what you said. When I was newly diagnosed, luckily for me, I had two friends, which I consider my right arm and my left, which unfortunately they've both passed, but one would set up the appointments for me because I couldn't talk for myself. I just had no voice. And the other would accompany me to the appointments. So that helped a lot. And she got me to the point of where I could go on my own. But still within the healthcare system, it became a lot stressful each time showing up to an appointment because it was a very negative setting. And it was not fulfilling, but I did eventually find a different doctor, a better doctor where the atmosphere was so different. And I stopped missing appointments. I started showing up. And even now when my doctor left where I met him at, I followed him to a new office, and it's still the same feeling of being able to go and feel like it's more positive, that if I miss something, if I'm not the perfect patient, he's not ready to throw me away or yell at me or make it feel like I'm never going to get it right. He just continues to work with me. Like I had my blood pressure and my blood sugar were out of control. And so he was like, get it together, blah, blah, blah. I finally fixed it. And then there were new numbers he was talking about. So I kind of tuned him out. And I'm like, I'm not ready to move on to the next thing. Let's celebrate what I did right. And it took him about 6 months and I still was not getting it. And he finally just took out pen and paper and drew me a picture. And was like, this is where you were, this is where you are. And I was like, oh, it's like, you should have started with that. And so that has changed our relationship because he understands he has to be more visual with me, because just yelling out numbers, I'm like, you tell me numbers all the time.
Yeah.
You're always going to find a number you don't like. I don't have time to focus on that. So, but that's all I wanted to add or say.
Thanks, Kellyanne. Let's see. Lynn put something really interesting. Unmute and say what you said in the chat.
Yeah, hi, my name is Lynn. I've been thinking a lot about what social determinants of health are, especially since I think that in the beginning of my career, including them into charts was seen as trauma-informed and equity-based to consider the outside. But I think that I think we need to go a step farther of like, what do you do? What's a profile of what you say someone who is thriving? And then think about why some people are offered those opportunities or not. So I like to call them social determinants of wealth, where wealth might be the ability to reach out to a friend, or the real ability to come in and not just keep or the ability to have someone else find someone to drive me to the appointment. Not that I don't have secure transportation, but I figured out a way there. I think that for me, there's people who've survived for generations because we are still here today. And I think for me, talking about like, if someone's going to be healthy, they need to have a sense of autonomy. Well, how are our workflows in the office not actually having them be part of the choice? Or how do we listen to what someone's priority is first, not what we think their priority is? And so I think that for me, sometimes the sense of urgency for specific doctor's visits feels like, well, I've gone this many years, no one actually giving me this health literacy. So what's one more day when I'm actually more concerned about finding housing? And so I think for me, social determinants of wealth really shifts it to also for people who may not be part of certain communities to remember they are part of a community, even if it's privilege, and how do you share that privilege with others? So that's how I like to look at them.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, Lynn. Yeah, one of my patients once said to me, it's social deterrence to health is really, when we think of a social determinants are really social deterrents. So I can never say that phrase without her voice ringing in my ear about that. But the truth is that social determinants are both positive and negative. And that's what we're going to kind of explore in a minute. So I'm going to show a few kind of didactic slides. You guys can rest for a little while, turn off your cameras. Just listen and look. But you don't have to guard your face because I find that exhausting. So culturally affirmative practice basically says that culture is healthy for people. There are many protective factors, for our mental well-being, our physical well-being, and our spiritual well-being that come from our culture. It has a broad definition in the second bullet. There's race and ethnicity in this country definitely determine a lot, but there's also class, much as we hope to ignore that. Class is there, gender, generation, profession, all of those kinds of things are kind of part of what assemble in your own portfolio of culture. So what we're going to talk about, a little bit is a way to explore that with clients, for yourself and also with clients. So it's, our focus today is, where did you come from? How did you get here? What was the journey? And why did those things happen? And then to be able to think about how to express those as strengths I can draw on and challenges that I need to avoid. Next one. So Genogram, which is a tool we're going to talk about, shows blood family, blood and adopted family. So it's what people define as their family. So as I mentioned, there are other kinds of tools like this. I like this one because I like the history and helping people think through the history of their family. It also does help a little medically. There are diseases that run in people's families, so it's good to know about that. But more it's about, what is family like for you? Where do you find your learning about life, and also, the things that support you in being successful in life. And also there's a lot about where our families came from and what they were struggling with that still reverberates through the generations. The ancestors are still there. They don't go away. They're ancestors now, but they're still with us. And they definitely influence, their history influences what we do on a day-to-day basis. Next one, Kamisha. So just, to kind of hammer it home, why is this genogram and the culturally affirmative practice and et cetera, why are they connected? Your blood family is, or whoever raised you, is really your first contact with your own culture. So it's important for that purpose. We all know that storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool in all human endeavors. And this is a kind of storytelling. And then in that third section is what I was mentioning before. USA culture is just very, very values individual and discounts, the fact that none of us actually is an individual, that we all have these kind of connections. And then it can, the process of doing it can also make you think through, oh, that's why this is hard for me, or why my parents did that. So it's useful in all those frames. Next one. Okay, so we're going to see a video now. This is the nervous part, because I'm going to be showing the video. Where did it go? Here. Let's see. So I'm going to share the screen and pick out my video. Are you guys seeing the PowerPoint part? May take a second.
Yes, we are.
Okay, good. All right, so here's the first video. Everyone pray to the technology gods. Are you hearing that?
Yep, we're hearing the beeping. There we go. This works.
One of the things that we want to focus on is where you're from, how'd you get here, where you stay now. How do you spell Suja?
S-H-U-J-A.
So now, Malcolm, you were born here in 1972.
I was born in Los Angeles because my mother was visiting.
How old your mother was?
I think my mother was like 14 or something like that.
When we know that someone has passed, we put a line through it like that. Your parents.
My father is Henry Johnson. My mother, Otis Stillwell.
Is your father or your mother?
That's my mother. My grandfather didn't care if he had a boy or girl. She was gonna be, or he was gonna be named after.
What made him decide to go to California?
That's a story. He worked with the water. Today you would call it a longshoreman. In our culture, it would be called passe la blanc, and they found out he was Black.
So he decided to go to California?
Yeah.
And then Tanisha has children, right?
Yes, she has a boy and a girl. Little Malcolm.
Little Malcolm.
Because we weren't sure, if I was gonna make it out in the prison, so she said her first boy would name him after me.
There is a symbol that's used to indicate divorce. These two lines put in between your mother and your father.
Break,
Yeah,
They never
and
married.
that's the way to describe it, is
Yeah.
that it broke.
Yeah.
My father, when he was 15, he got out of the army, went to go find his father, I guess. That's how we got to the Bay Area. My grandfather was stationed at Travis Air Force Base and had a house in Vallejo when they first built Fort Terrace. First real place that the black folks really moved into.
They moved to Richmond, then they settled in,
They settled in San Francisco on Trail Hill.
and then everything.
17. Yeah, she's getting ready to go to college. That girl got excellent grades, straight A's. Couldn't be more proud.
I guess the only woman my father had really ever been in love with is in the 60s after I was born. But the woman had been previously married.
My mother went back, she was living in New Orleans. One time, she came to San Francisco. My aunt Naomi said she didn't want to keep Nona no more. My mother is like, well, what do you want me to do? What do you mean you don't want her?
And in those days, cousin come over, you stayed friends. So the cousin came over, party, and when he went to sleep, he let himself out and left the door open. And the ex-cousin came in the house, shot the woman, and shot my father.
And my mother didn't go pick her up at the train. That my mother didn't have a maternal connection with her. She didn't like, oh, I'm so happy to see you or nothing.
The woman died. My father came through and was walking down the street carrying this lady, Kelly.
Oh.
And from then on, my father was an alcoholic.
So Nona felt abandoned. This is coming out of her mouth. If we weren't born, she would have had a chance.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to do just a couple of little more slides to show you what this one is, particularly what Shuja drew onto his dragon, so you can onto his genogram, so you can kind of see what it looks like. So the circles are women, the squares are men. There actually is now also a triangle for people who are non-binary, or we don't know. Sometimes we don't know. So you can see there the circles and the squares, and Shuja's father, had his mother, but then as you can see there, what else is happening on the right hand side there is additional partners that he had during his life, who then some of them had kids of their own, and they're also important. You can see that they come down a little almost to Shuja's line, and that means they're in approximately the same generation. Looks like they may be a little bit younger. So, and there's Shuja in the middle. Shuja, by the way, doesn't mind sharing this, but he mentions in the video a little bit that he got into trouble. Actually, I think that might be in the thing you're going to see in a minute. But he was at San Quentin for 35 years behind that, and just got out about 5 years ago. So it just is. It's a powerful experience to kind of reflect on your life like that. Next one. And this is what it looks like once you do a graphic design of it. This is the same, the same one that's just made into a PowerPoint, a genogram kind of structure, which you can get online. Next one. So you get demographic information that you heard little snippets of, cultural, pieces, what's important in the family, kind of the life cycle of those different events that you see here. And then also information about how are people functioning? What are they good at? How do they handle different kinds of challenges? And what is going to be difficult for them? And then relationship information, which relationships are really the key to our helping anybody. The kind of work we do, you never really make headway with people unless you start out with having a human relationship with them. And this helps us understand how people make relationships, which usually comes from family. Next one. So just a couple of hints, because you're going to do this in a few minutes. Put the same generation on one line. If you start at the left-hand side, that's the oldest, and it goes to youngest. And we want to account for everybody. Doesn't matter if you're adopted. It doesn't matter if you lost touch. You want to include everybody there, because all of that stuff is really important in the history of your family. So next one. So this is, you typically start out with this, this appearance, with the a dad and a mom. There's lots more variations on this, but this is the simplest thing. And those are dates of birth, as you can imagine, next to people's little squares. And this would suggest that all of these people are still alive. Next one. So I mentioned this female, male, and non-binary or unknown. And next one. So as we saw, with Shuja's father, not infrequently, there are multiple relationships people have, and with multiple next generations. So you can see how that gets depicted. That the two people who are originally married on the outer part there, and you can see the two lines showing that they got divorced, and then there were two other stepfathers to the children involved, and one children of his own. Is this making sense to you a little bit? Are you kind of able to interpret this into what this might look like in an actual family? Let's go to the next one. Oops. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of Jeffrey's family history. I'm hoping this is going to work, you guys. I'm here in my office where there is a whiteboard. It's actually the same place where you saw my colleague Valerie doing the original genogram with Shuja. You can tell by the quilt. I'm going to turn my computer around so we can see the whiteboard, and then Jeffrey and I are just going to kind of talk through pretty quickly some early parts of his life. So here we go. Ready, set, go. Jeffrey? This is very high tech, you guys. I got it on a cardboard box. Oh, I'm going to turn the light off here. So Jeffrey?
Hey, it works.
Yeah, Kathleen, would it be okay to share the screen for a moment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was okay with me.
I just wanted to share something with everyone. These are, I typically, when I'm teaching or when I'm doing lectures, I use, different props or different mediums to sort of get people's minds to shift into a place where I hope they are focused on the goal at hand, right? And I would like to share this with you all, if you don't mind. This is a poem by Etheridge Knight, a Black poet during the Black poet movement. And I think it kind of helps convalesce sort of what genograms are about, right?
Ooh. Did you figure out how to do the sharing, Jeffrey? Okay. I haven't seen it yet. Here we go. Ah. Wait, slow down. We need to know who these people are.
This is someone on YouTube, not necessarily Etheridge Knight. Etheridge Knight passed away in the early 2000s, but they decided that they would, the person who created this decided that they would put together some type of visual medium to help articulate what the poem is about, right? So I'll start from the beginning. I apologize. I'm usually like 10 thoughts ahead of what I need to be. Let's see.
I don't know if the sound was shared because we don't hear the audio yet.
Okay, that's unfortunate. I'm not sure how else to share the sound.
Jeffrey, can you send a link?
Absolutely.
To Kanisha?
Yeah.
Send a link to Kanisha. That may be the best way to do it.
Okay.
I think I found it. I'm going to share my screen. You tell me if this is the right one, and I'm going to share my audio and screen. Just 1 second. Yes, I'm going to stop sharing it. And
Kanisha is
my sound.
Is our technology angel.
Is this the right one?
Correct.
And can you guys hear it?
To the wall of my cell are 47 pictures, 47 black faces. My father, mother, grandmothers, one dead, grandfathers, both dead, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, first and second, nieces and nephews. They stare across the space at me, sprawling on my bunk. I know their dark eyes, they know mine. I know their style, they know mine. I am all of them, they are all of me. They are farmers, I am a thief. I am me, they are thee. I have at one time or another been in love with my mother, one grandmother, two sisters, two aunts, one went to the asylum, and 5 cousins. I am now in love with a 7-year-old niece. She sends me letters written in large block print, and her picture is the only one that smiles at me. I have the same name as one grandfather, 3 cousins, 3 nephews, and 1 uncle. The uncle disappeared when he was 15, just took off and caught a freight, they say. He's discussed each year when the family has a reunion. He causes uneasiness in the clan. He is an empty space. My father's mother, who is 93 and who keeps the family Bible with everybody's birth dates and death dates in it, always mentions him. There's no place in her Bible for whereabouts unknown. Each fall, the graves of my grandfathers call me. The brown hills and red gullies of Mississippi send out their electric messages, galvanizing my genes. Last year, like a Simon quitting the cold ocean, leaping and bucking up his birth stream, I hitchhiked my way from LA with 16 caps in my pocket and a monkey on my back. And I almost kicked it with the kinfolk. I walked barefooted in my grandmother's backyard. I smelled the old land and the woods. I sipped corn whiskey from fruit jars with the men. I flirted with the women. I had a ball till the caps ran out and my habit came down. That night, I looked at my grandmother and split. My guts were screaming for junk, but I was almost contented. I had almost caught up with me. The next day in Memphis, I cracked a crocus crib for a fix. This year, there is a gray stone wall damming my stream, and when the falling leaves stir my jeans, I pace my cell, a flop on my bunk, and stare at 47 black faces across the space. I am all of them, they are all of me. I am me, they are thee, and I have no sons to float in the space between.
I think I should preface this with saying that when I had started graduate school, one of the activities that they wanted us to do was a genogram. And I'm just thinking, oh, great. Here I am. I thought I had left my past far behind. And now, not only do I have to revisit it, but I also have to analyze it to a certain degree, which created a lot of different mixed emotions, right? How do you sort of contend with the things that have contributed to who you are and have caused you a tremendous amount of pain? Sometimes that's just etched in our history, right? When we ask, who is this uncle? What was that relationship like? Whatever happened to that family Bible? How do you deal with loss when it wasn't culturally available to you? Okay. So I was able to complete the assignment because I paid way too much for graduate school to drop out. And I would love to share with some of you all the cultural genogram, the family cultural genogram that I was able to create at that time.
Do you already have it as a file, Jeffrey, that we can share?
I do.
Oh, that's much higher tech than trying to draw it on the board. So let's go for it.
Yeah. I mean, so like many folks in America, we have access to census data information, right? I was in a position of privilege where I was able to sort of pay for a program that would allow me to gather as much information that was available. I'm looking for a way to put this in slideshow. Here we go. So that's my family, as far back as the census data would allow. My great-grandfather, well, no, several years great-grandfather, are 3 generations of a great-grandfather. Solomon Suter. He was 86. No, he wasn't. He was 81, where he married his wife, Candace, who was 36. Okay? And all I could think about at the time is like, wow, my family was really color purple, right? Like older men marrying younger, much younger Black women, right? Solomon was also the first person in my family who was a sharecropper and sort of declared a free man in North Carolina, Seaboard, North Carolina, which no longer exists. It's been incorporated into parts of Charlotte, right? We were originally, I don't have a better word for this, owned by Scottish settlers in Northern Carolina who lived in the foothills of Carolina, right? But for whatever reason, which I don't know, Solomon was a freed man and he owned a piece of land, and he married Candace at 36, and she produced several children. One happens to be my great-grandfather, Jeffrey. It's amazing how unintentional the name Jeffrey has been passed down from generation to generation. My mother did not name me after my great-grandfather. She named me after my dad, but it is a name that has sort of popped up in our family history again and again and again, right? And I did figure out that I did research and find out the name Jeffrey is actually, I can't remember, Celtic, right? And it stands for the one who walks with God. Okay. And then from my great-granddad, Jeffrey, came my first love, Patricia White, my grandma Patty, right? And she had several kids as well. My mother was the second to the oldest. And this is where I was able to get a better understanding of what role women played during my mom's generation and how that impacted how she showed up as a mother. My mother was considered the black sheep. I don't know if anyone has seen What Love's Got to Do with It, but my mom was much like Anime. She was left with family when my grandmother decided to migrate to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, just because Pittsburgh at the time was a steel mill industry, and there was a lot of opportunity for Black folks there. But my grandmother decided to leave my mom behind and take her eldest, my Uncle John, with her to Pittsburgh, believing that she would have better opportunity or chances to be successful without having to deal with a young Black girl on top of everything else, right? And so when my mom eventually joined my grandmother, she was kind of labeled as fast. She did not want to go to church every other day, which is something that people did. She had a mouth on herself, which I inherited and I love. And she was incredibly independent. And my mother, that's my granny. And that's Queen Victoria. She raised my grandmother. I mean, she raised my mother, and she pretty much raised my grandmother as well. We called her Queen Victoria because she was a queen. She never had a bad thing to say about anyone, right? And the most beautiful thing that could ever happen is to spend the summer with her and learn how to make her biscuits, right? Like if you can make her biscuits, you have finally arrived, all right? And that's her son, Joe. This is my Uncle Moses, his daughter. It's also his daughter. I apologize, I've forgotten the flow of this, but this was at my nephew's graduation. He graduated class valedictorian and was awarded some type of award from the mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick, for his commitment to community-based services. And the people behind my sister, who's in the front, are my uncle, my aunt, and her partner. And that's Uncle Bobby. That's all of us. And James, who was the class valedictorian. And this is me and my aunt Adele. And this is my immediate family genogram, which consists of my mother and her siblings. And these are my folk. Those are both of my sisters, flagging the tall dude in the middle, and all three in the front are my nephews when they don't like to remember how young they are or were, right? Like this, they all had bird chests. And that's my sister, Sheila. I'm the baby of the family. This is also my sister and my mom later in life. My nephews who decided to work out one summer, right? And so they got muscular, Martez and Little Richard. Sheila and her partner, Sheila and Little Richard, Sheila and all three of her boys. And this is also my brother in the white wife beater, unfortunately, with his son and daughter flagging him. And my eldest sister, Roxanne, who recently moved here, is convinced that I'm bougie. Right? And this is me and my mom the last time I had the privilege of seeing her alive and in person. Those are my two eldest siblings. Those are my nephews with my sister Sheila. That is the sonogram of the first grandbaby. And the rest are just pictures. I guess one last thing. My genogram would be super incomplete if I did not include as you see, there are a lot of different lines about what type of relationship took place between the different family members, right? For some reason, that felt very helpful, right? Like it was like, oh, now that makes sense, right? But this is also my chosen family. My gay dads. I was at their wedding in New York. This is my dad's artwork. And my mom, my adopted mom, Aurora Harris. She's a poet and an incredibly exceptional person. And she has loved me without me ever asking. And that's what my cultural genogram looks like. I'm sorry, Kathleen, I feel like I hijacked your presentation. I apologize.
But so you did this was your doctoral thesis.
No, this was just one of the many assignments that they give us to say, you need to know yourself well enough to work with other.
So is there anything, when you think on the process of creating that, what did you carry away with you? What are 3 things that it made you think differently about?
I am a person, and you know this well, way too well. I'm a nerd. I really like science. I like facts. I like things that help explain other things, right? And when you're a young person sort of going through life, you're not able, or at least I wasn't able to sort of consider, sexism, racism, right? And all the things that impact how people show up, right? However, being able to do this analysis provided or expanded my worldview on the conditions that women, especially Black women, have had to endure while raising families. The amount of gratitude and empathy that I have for the Black women in my family who have had to take on roles, willingly or not, it just expanded based on this project, right?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Kamisha, let's go ahead back to the slides. Okay, so you've now heard kind of the theory behind culturally affirmative practice and why genograms are important to that. You shared a little bit of your own life stories in terms of where you come from in your work life. And you've seen a couple of examples of genograms. So what I want you to do now is take out a piece of paper or a whiteboard, printer paper, whatever you got around you, and spend just, it says 15 minutes, but why? Let's make it 10, because you don't need to be super complex about it. Do a 3-generation genogram with you as the 3rd generation, so starting with your grandparents, and test it out. We'll put the little example thing back, and what you want to be thinking about is, what do you know about those people? So you want to make a few notes here and there, for yourself. They're living in Alabama, in the poem, never heard from again, or whatever stories about the family members. So let's go ahead to do that. I'll ask if anybody has any questions about that, and then we'll come back together at, I think it's at 12:45. We'll come back together and ask a few people to share what they've done. So does anybody have any questions about the task? Good. That's fine. Yeah, we can just leave that one up there just so people have a little bit of a model.
Miss Kathleen?
Yes, Mr. Roberts.
I can only remember my dad's mom, not her husband, and definitely not my mom's parents, but I heard stories about them though.
Put it down.
Okay, then.
You can make a dotted line around them, like, I'm not sure how much of this is fact. But
Okay.
if it's the family stories about them, in a
Yes,
way,
ma'am.
that's even more important than whether it was true, is what the family understands was
Okay.
true.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Kathleen.
Okay.
Great point. And then
Anybody
one more
else?
time to
Sorry, go
remind
ahead.
folks, no, just going to say to remind everyone, can we walk through this a little bit, reminding everyone of who goes where as far as the siblings and the dotted line meaning, the double line meaning?
Sure. This one is the most complicated one, but we can start with that one. So in this genogram, there's a circle all the way over on the left, and that is, in this case, mom. And then there's a square all the way over on the right, and that is dad. And you can see they have a solid line between them. So they were married, and they had one kid together who's a girl on that side. That's right. Then mom had a second and third partner who she was not married to, but with her with her other partner there, she had one son. And then with the third partner, she had, after her divorce, she had a girl and a boy. So that's what this is saying. Does that make sense to people? Okay. Let's go ahead and leave that one up there. And now just do some sketching. We'll see you back at 12:45, and we'll talk about what that experience was like. If you have questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll keep monitoring and we'll answer. 5 more minutes, folks. We're halfway through our time. Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, let's come on back together. I'm not assuming that anybody finished, but ooh, I see that, Chris. But I did want a chance to ask if there's anybody who would like to walk us through what they did just as their own example, and then we'll just talk more generally about what you think the usefulness of this is. So is there anybody, Chris, we would love to have you talk us through that, but I know it's just not going to happen. Yeah. Okay. Such is life. Is there anybody else who is willing to just kind of walk us through what they wrote down?
I'll go for it. You ready, Miss Kathleen?
I am ready.
Okay, for a second, I remember as a kid, I remember my grandma on my dad's side. She was the only grandparent alive. The rest of them, they were passed away. And then, but I remember her name was Marie, Grandma Marie. And then I was told had her husband, Grandpa Buck. Okay, together they made Leo, my daddy. Leo married Elizabeth, my mom, and between them two, there were 4 girls, okay, 4 daughters, and 6 brothers, including me. But Leo was a Rolling Stone. I don't know any of those outside brothers or sisters that he may have. I just heard that he had outside children. And then from me, Miss Kathleen, I married Desi. Thank God I'm happily divorced. And then from me and Desi came Jaleesa, my daughter, who from Jaleesa, she's got my granddaughter Jemiah and my grandson Jewels. Brain wrecker.
Hey, Robert, can you turn it around so that we can see what you're reading? So we can see the.
Oh God, can you see it?
Oh gosh.
Can you see
that is one big family.
Yes, ma'am. And there were 10 total of 10 between mom and dad. But like I say, Papa was a Rolling Stone where every latest hat was his home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's what I can remember there, Miss Kathleen. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Robert. Thanks so much. David, you're up next. Do you want to talk to us about yours for a minute?
Okay, so mine is interesting because we're gonna start with my grandparents, both sides. So there is Dorothy and Buster on my mother's side, and then there is Dolores and John on my father's side. All right, all passed away. And then there is my mother, Dorothy Francis, and my father, Joseph. They both are passed away. But the funny thing there is I'm adopted. So those two adopted me. And then they adopted me and my sister. And I kind of didn't even follow, I didn't do their relatives, but I mean, I can list on, my mother has a brother named David, a brother named James, has a sister named Mary, and a sister named Carolyn.
Mm-hmm.
My father has a sister named Regina, my sister named Honey. I don't even know what her real name is because everybody calls her Honey. A brother named James and a brother named John. And then I went down to me and my sister. Sister name's Debbie. And then, so I have 2 children, Sky and David. My sister has 2 children, RJ, or Ronald, we call him RJ, and Felicia. Yeah. And then Felicia has kids of her own, and RJ has kids of their own. So that's how I took it, and it was interesting. But the caveat, and I don't know if there's a symbol in there of whether when you're adopted or not, and how that works out, because you have some actually unknown parents that are there.
Yeah, there are. That's a little bit kind of Genogram 102, not in the basic class, but it happens a lot. What I recommend to people is just put yourself in. You know, blood. Probably a lot of people who think their blood parents aren't really, right? So, but then with a dotted line off to this other family, and that could be a circle with a question mark in it, or it could also have whatever it is, you know, whatever the details are that you know. Let's see. I think we had. Somebody had their hand up, I saw.
I think it was Raquelian's hand was up.
Raquelian. Do you have a question, Raquelian, or did you want to show us your genogram?
No, I can show you mine. And it was funny that you said this because I've worked on this for years, and I had actually kind of made notes while y'all were talking. But I did put it on the paper, not in the same format as yours.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you could see mine. Let's see.
It's a little hard.
I think
let me see if I take the background off. And
yeah.
Let me
Oh, and
see.
David, I forgot we didn't see yours, David. So we're going to come back to you in a second. If you just hold it up for us.
Let me see if I choose a background and take it off. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so if you can see it, I didn't do it.
That's what I now think of as Beyonce tennis ball green. That piece of paper.
Happens to be the one on my desk, but within the last 2 years, that's about where I am, is about 3 generations back. And one of the last ones that I didn't know is I got from my grandfather, who is 93. I was
Wow.
able to go down his side and I learned some things I didn't know. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm my mother's only child. And I have her mother and her father. Her father, I have his mother and his father, and but I don't know much about his father, but he was military. I can always look up his record. That's what I plan to do as I stop going through. But my grandmother on my mother's side, her parents died, and so they were left in an orphanage. So I only have a name for them, just like Mary and Dave.
Yeah.
My mother, she's on her 3rd marriage. I'm her only child, but my stepfather, whom I carried his name for a while, I have him and his parents. I have my mother's mother, who is the last grandmother I lost because people had kids so young, I kind of grew up with I had 6 grandmothers, 3 greats and 3 grands growing up, and I didn't lose one until I was 21.
Yeah.
So the final one I lost was my mother's mother. I have her and her mother and father. I more recently learned something about her father, which is the last name that I have. And so I didn't know any of them or much about them, but I did, by inheritance of a family member who kept all of the information on my grandmother's side. I'm a lot further back on them. But I have only for this page, I just have my grandmother's mother and father.
Yeah.
We got a request. Clarence and,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
We got a request in the chat, by the way, Raquelian, for you to hold it up again to the camera because people wanted to see it, and just kind of leave it there for a minute. Bring it down just a little bit.
Okay. I can't see when I'm holding it to the camera.
Oh,
yes, I can. Oh, there we are. I forgot I have a second screen. So, this is me, and this is my father. This is his mother and her parents, and that was Ernestine. My father is actually named after my grandmother's father, which is Thomas, and her mother's name was Blanny. My grandfather, which this is the only one still alive, his parents were Ella and I can't see it on there.
I can't. Is it Clifton?
Let's see. Yeah, Clifton. And so then there is my mother and her many last names and husbands. No matter the joke on my mother's side is that no woman has ever been divorced. They all become widows. So that hurts my dating life. This is her mother, which again, her list of last names, and her parents, my grandmother, who I have the most information on, and her parents, which is, that's her mother, Orly, and her father, Clarence. This is the last name I carried, which is Ellison. And I recently found out, or as I looked him up and got more information, I found he died in California the year before I was born. So that's why I have no knowledge or little knowledge of him. This would be my mother's father, which is, I'm sorry. This is my mother's first husband, my stepfather, and his mother. It's very funny. His mother's name is Jessie and his father's name was Arlene. So that was always a funny mix up. But this is my mother's father. This is his father, which I said was, I'll have to look up his military record to learn more about him because I don't have any further information. But this is my grandmother, Helen, who was also married several times, but that's just her initial first name, Patterson. And she was the one, she had an older sister, but she had a older sister and older brother. She was the youngest, and her and the younger brother were left in an orphanage because something happened to their parents. So that's
beautiful. That's beautiful. And you guys can see that Raquelian did hers kind of sideways rather than vertical, and it makes no difference. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead. We've got 5 minutes left, actually 4. So I just want to do one more minute with you guys. Kamisha, could you put the slides back up again? Uh-oh. Oh, good. I was afraid I froze there for a minute. So I really just want to, get 2 minutes worth of, what do you think about using this tool with consumers? You guys only had 10 minutes, which is not a very long time to construct a thing like this, but can you imagine leading, some consumers that you're working with, your clients really, through a process like this? And do you think it would be useful based on your own experiences here? So we can go ahead and take the slides back down, Kamisha. Thank you. So what do you think? Is it a work tool? Tammy, I see you talking, but we can't hear you. There, go ahead. Say it again. Oops.
Maybe you're double muted on your device.
Oops.
Still no luck. Oh, there it is. Now we hear you.
Sorry about that. Okay. Sometimes my patients struggle with naming a support system. And so something like this would be a good tool to help them think outside of the box with people outside their immediate circle geographically, and look at the bigger picture and say, oh yeah, I can go to my auntie all the time or something, and it would help remind them of those people.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Thanks, Tammy.
Can I add something else? This is Raquelian again. I've also had to do this with my daughter, who is not biologically mine. Her and me and her mom were best friends. And so when she passed, she kind of left her to me. And because I knew about my friend's family growing up, I've done this several times for her. And it's been a little helpful because all of us need to know those things of where we come from, even if it's painful or if it doesn't all go together. But it helps a lot to be able to fill in some of those blanks. And this has been a long journey for me. And I put in the chat, I think it could be helpful as a chosen activity for someone who's ready for it. But I don't think it should be forced on anyone. Just kind of as you started, then it becomes like a rabbit hole, because I can't even count the amount of years I've been working on mine, and I still have so far to go.
Yeah, I think as a clinical tool, what I have found is that, so first of all, the way clinics and medical spaces get set up, we don't allow people to bring themselves into it almost at all. In fact, sometimes we take their clothes away even. So there's nothing that we do a lot of work to strip away their context of who they are as people. And I think that that's really bad for healing, and it makes people not want to come to the doctor, and it makes them, feel bad. So this for me is a thing about bringing people's whole selves, with them, into their medical care. And as you said, Raquelian, reminding people about where their assets and their challenges, but also their assets maybe.
Well, and it could start as a question of what exists medically in your past.
Yep. Yeah.
The medical things.
It may be less threatening for people in some ways. Yeah. All right. So we've reached the end of our time. I felt like it flew by. I'll turn it back over to Kamisha to close us out.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kathleen, for hosting for us or facilitating for us. Definitely can ask so many questions and go give a lot further with this exercise. But thank you all for joining us. And someone asked about sharing. We usually share the slides and we share the recording with participants so they'll be able to go back if there's anything that you want to pull out from this. But again, thank you all for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.